Why is it so hard to deliver truly transformative technology programs at scale in the public sector? It always has been, and it still is. We live in something of a technological golden age right now, as far as the opportunity you can see for public sector organisations. We've got AI and generative AI most recently. We've got the maturation of things like IoT and cloud and edge computing. We've got intelligent automation. We've got this marvelous array of different technologies that you don't need to be a rocket scientist to see how they might be applied to make a genuine change to the lives, not just of people like you and me that are receiving public sector services, but the people working in those organisations delivering them too. So why is it so hard? What are the blockages? What are the hurdles that we need to try and jump over, be they cultural or technical or systemic, to start to make a difference in this area? One person I know who knows more than anybody else about this is Andrea Danes. She has spent 30 years working on the front line of public service delivery in the United States. She's worked in those organisations delivering programs at federal, regional, local level. Additionally, she's a foster mum, and she speaks freely and openly about her own experiences during childhood, where her family was on the receiving end of an array of different public sector services themselves. She's now a global human services leader at EY. She looks across the entire planet at this problem. She spends time in these areas. She understands the kind of technologies that are available. And she's got quite a lot of insight into not just what the problems are, but how we might start to solve them. And she's got some examples to show us too. This was a fascinating and fun and insightful conversation, and I hope you think so too. Andrea, welcome to the Tech for Good podcast. How should we begin? You've got a venerable and interesting and sophisticated background in the topic that we're addressing today. I'll let you introduce yourself. What is your current role, and how on earth did you end up in it?
Thank you, Romilly. It is always a pleasure to speak with you. This is one of many of our conversations, maybe the first we've recorded, but always love getting to brainstorm with you. My current role is with Ernst & Young. It is a global organization, one of the big four consulting firms. I hold a couple different roles within EY. I am part of our national practice focused on government and public sector, and specifically focused on health and human services. I also, for the last 3 years, have been our global human services leader. So we do very similar work in about 27 countries, supporting governments who have a responsibility to address vulnerability with government programs. And I should probably preface as I make that intro, the comments that I make throughout the course of our recording are my opinions and in no way reflective of the overall firm's stance or point of view directly.
Noted.
How did I get here? How did I get here? That's a very interesting story. See, my mom and my dad met. No, just kidding.
That's interesting.
I won't go quite that far back. But I basically started my career as a state employee. I spent more than a decade working in government programs. Those are human services programs. One was child welfare and the other is Medicaid, which here in the U.S. is our program for health insurance for those who are not financially able to provide that or have it provided through an employer. So I spent more than a decade as a state employee, started very modestly doing data entry and worked my way up to overseeing the primary conversion of all of our systems because of HIPAA, which is, again, a U.S. regulation around security, privacy, and administrative simplification. Spent the remaining 20 years of my now 30-plus year career working in the private sector, leading national practices, but always focused on government as a client and always focused on health and human services as a sector. For me, it's very personal, the reason that I do the work that I do. I grew up with a single mom. We lived in government subsidized housing. I received free lunches at school and commodity food distribution, which is before we had a plastic card that you could go into the regular grocery store and use. That also shows you a little bit about how old I am. And, then even as an adult, I've carried through these personal experiences with the programs. We have 3 grown children. Our youngest came to us through the foster care system. Grace is very fine with me sharing a bit of her story in the process. So, she came in at age 11, stayed till she was 13, went back with her mom at 17, came back and stayed with us. I'm sorry, came in at 11, stayed till she was 13, went back with her mom, came back to us at 17, and then stayed until she went out on her own. So there's several years there where I had to navigate programs that would provide services to her directly, but from the outside in. And even though I could still pick up the phone and call the agency director, I literally had to sit at a keyboard and try to make sense of the processes and the procedures and the data and the things that were being asked of me and that I was providing on her behalf. So, I love the work that I do. I do it very personally and very passionately, and really from that inside out and outside in view.
That's brilliant. I think that most people would love to have the opportunity to create or to have a career that was so neatly synchronized with their own personal interests, right? Because then you get to maybe not feel like you're doing work all the time and you're actually improving things for yourself. It's great. But
absolutely.
All of which leads into the topic we're talking about, obviously, which is the issue around emerging technology, of which there's quite a lot at the moment, and the pace is kind of furious. Our minds immediately leap towards generative AI and things like that. But there's a portfolio of rapidly emerging technologies that government and the deliverers, if you like, of public services could be leveraging at pace, quickly, dynamically. But, and I think your personal experience speaks to this a bit, perhaps, actually, it's kind of slow. It can be kind of difficult. And what we're, I guess, talking about today is, well, how can we improve that? How can the folks responsible for delivering these services become a bit more agile and a bit more able to get not necessarily ahead of the curve, but a bit closer to the crest of the wave, if you like. So rather than me try to describe what that problem is, maybe I'll leave that to you. Obviously, you've got an insider's view. What would you characterize that problem as?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll do a couple different things here. One, obviously, the majority of my experience is here in the US, but in the role that I currently hold, I can tell you that I've seen way more commonality in the various countries that we serve, especially, unfortunately, when it comes to the challenges. I kind of hoped when I started in this role, I'd find that one place where they had figured everything out and we could just replicate that globally. And the more that we engaged in the conversation, the more we realized the challenges are pretty global, really. It's old technology, it's tight budgets, it's a strained and challenged workforce, and it's a continued increase of demand from residents of each of the geographies for new types of services or expansion of services. So the challenges are pretty much global in nature. And what's interesting is inside the context of government, I think, we love to start with the tech conversation, and I'm a complete nerd, so I'm super happy to be in that part of the conversation. But we really have to go back and look at how the programs have been set up from a funding and a policy standpoint, because those are the things that sometimes are the constraining factors when an agency or an organization is trying to move down the path of new technology. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We do a lot of work in what we call prevention services. So it's this idea that rather than wait for someone to fall off the cliff into crisis, you as government know certain things and you can engage more quickly. You can offer services more proactively. You can potentially help that individual stabilize more quickly. It probably will cost less to do that. And you can probably continue to strengthen a particular community because that individual has had their life less disrupted than it might have been had things continued. So this proactive way of thinking about delivery of services, which is greatly enabled by a ton of the new technologies that we'll be talking about in a bit, really the challenge is budgeting. In a system that budgets for reaction, when you're saying, okay, I need you to take some of that money and I need you to put it over here and I need you to invest in these technologies and these processes, change some policies to include earlier access to program benefits. When I ask you to do that proactively, you say, I can't take money from people I'm already serving who have already fallen off the cliff of crisis and move it over here to do something that will help people not fall off a year from now. So, that policy foundation, the programmatic principle of reaction versus prevention is one of the biggest things we run up against. The other thing I'll tell you that we run up against frequently is procurement. And this, again, is a global challenge. Most government agencies, and rightly so, understandably so, because it is public money that is being used, sit under very heavy-handed procurement laws and rules. And so when they go to market to try to secure a new technology, for example, they may have a very good idea of what they want. They may have an idea that they don't know exactly what they want, but they know there's something out there and they'd like to work with a vendor to figure it out. A lot of times their hands are tied. They're hindered from being able to have those direct conversations. Their procurement process can be lengthy. Certain organizations I've worked with, it's a 2-year process from start to finish. So when you think about the rapid pace of improving and increasing technology, by the time government has the idea to get it and actually procures it and has it, in-house, we're talking years. That tech it's old before it's live.
Yeah.
So I think those two things, again, often we start with the technology, what it can do. And most of the people I speak to in government, they would love to get their hands on more modern technology. They would love the opportunity to deploy some of these things in practice in their programs. But there are some real constraints.
Yeah. So we understand a bit more about what the problem is from your perspective and the reasons why. We spend quite a lot of time, and I spend quite a lot of time talking to people in and around the public sector as well. And there's a kind of weird dichotomy going on in there, which is that you've got the issues that you describe, which is there's a certain amount of entropy that's built into the bureaucracy that you wish you could change, whether that's policy or technical legacy or whatever it is. Existing in the same space as super enthusiastic, talented people who are trying really hard to get to work through those problems, often in little pockets all over the place.
Yes.
You can go into any place. We've spent time in the health service, with ambulance services, in local government, highways agencies, these kind of things. In every case, you can find really clever, energetic people trying to be ahead of the curve. Is that true everywhere? I'm guessing it is.
Yes, lovingly referred to as the innovative instigators. Right. that little pocket within an agency of the can-do folks who are pushing every policy lever, every budget lever, every collaboration lever that they can get their hands on to try to move forward specific initiatives that they believe will actually help deliver services more effectively. Those are the people I love hanging out with. They know that things can be better, and they're willing to push the envelope, probably to simplify it, to say less of no because and more yes if. And if you go in the context of governmental conversations, a lot of times those innovative instigators are stopped with no because, we can't do that because. And they push the envelope and they get the conversation to trend more toward yes if. Yes, we might be able to do that if. Maybe we plan for the budget 2 years in advance. Maybe we find a way to partner with another state or another county or another municipality that has a more seamless procurement process. Maybe we jointly procure. So I think it's finding those pockets of people. Part of the challenge, though, for those individuals, many times they don't have a long history inside government. They may have come in from some other industry. So they can quickly get frustrated by the hurdles that they have to go through, to get things done inside government. And frankly, the turnover rate, especially at the leadership level for most of the human services programs, again, a bit globally, that number continues to shrink considerably. 10 years ago, the average tenure would have been about 6 years. Now it's about 18 months.
Right.
So when you think about, shifting a program, shifting a budget, shifting a perspective, and the length of time that it takes to do that inside the context of government, and then you overlay that with these cycles of leaders coming in and staying for about 18 months and leaving again, you can see very quickly it gets challenging for those innovators inside an agency to find a way to move something forward that doesn't get upended, 18 months later by a change in leadership, for example.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the tricks then might be to say, well, look, can we do some impressive and interesting things within an 18-month timescale then, please? Because we
Yes.
know that we're not going to hold
Yes.
people long enough. But you want to do that anyway.
Romilly, but before you go off that point, because I think you just made an exceptional point that I want to really emphasize. Historically, it's legacy system implementation. It's long DDI cycles. And then we saw a bit of a shift toward a more agile mindset and an agile approach to implementing, but still monolithic, huge systems. What is so exciting now is we're seeing a couple of things happen simultaneously. Number one, a recognition that your legacy system can be maintained as a bit of a data store, transactional system. And you can build with microservices better functionality and better experiences around that core technology. So that microservices development is really beginning to pick up some speed. The other thing that I hear more and more of across government now is proof of concept or pilot. Yeah, the running joke in the US used to be you don't say pilot because the feds don't fund a pilot, right? But the truth of the matter is now I think people are realizing before I make a large investment or I shift my program significantly, I want to try it and see if it works. I want to try it for a period of time, a very contained period of time, and then go back and reevaluate the results of that and see if it is worth further engagement and investment. And those are exciting things because you can do a lot of amazing stuff in a short period of time if you've got kind of the clearance to do it.
Yeah. That marries with my own experience as well, I think, in that not that I'm clever or experienced enough in the actual implementation of any of this, but talking to people who have is where you go into the corner of an institution of some kind. Let's say you're delivering social care to adults within a certain geography. You've got a bunch of legacy systems, but you've got an opportunity to deploy a bit of intelligent automation over the top and bring in something else that can actually suddenly connect that into other agencies and provide a better response to, say, an emergency situation, a flood. And you've got to get some vulnerable people out of there.
Absolutely.
And now suddenly you can do that a lot quicker, not because you've replaced anything, but because you've come up with a new way quickly of just joining some things up together. You see that all over the place. But if I may put this question to you, that's great in that corner over there. But there's a similar agency a bit down the road with a similar person trying to answer the same problem. And he goes, yeah, I can solve that by using this tool and linking these things together. But they're using completely different platforms now.
Yeah.
What about that problem where you're saying, actually, what we've got is lots of people dealing with the same kind of problem. Let's look at this from the top. And suddenly the whole bureaucracy lands on top of everything.
So I'm going to be very thoughtful in how I characterize what I'm about to say, because there are, again, at every level of government, there are good, dedicated public servants who have spent their life in service to their country or their state or their county. But we have, and again, globally, not just in the US, we have set a structure that creates administration by program, and you can translate the word program into problem, just exactly what you were describing. So we have housing, disability services, elder care, child care, utility assistance. We create programs to solve problems, and those problems then are how we fund. And once we've created that structure that is problem oriented and program focused, it is its own fiefdom. It is its own kingdom. And it has leaders and it has those who have influence and who have power within that particular structure. The challenge is you serve the problem from a program lens, but what we're really talking about a lot of times when we're pressed to give an outcome, outcomes aren't defined by program or by problem, they're defined by people. And to the point that you just made, if I am a person, as I was in my childhood, struggling in a myriad of ways, I may have multiple problems, but I don't live my life in that narrow lane focus. I live my life and I have these challenges and I need assistance that comes to me not in four forms of problems and programs, but in a single way of being able to get support and assistance, which, by the way, is the only way, again, that government can go back and measure the effectiveness of these programs is by looking at that broader trajectory. And we do see good momentum. The conversations around social determinants of health, around overall life outcomes, vitality outcomes. These conversations are happening way more large scale now than they were 30 years ago when I started. You literally never heard those phrases. So I think we're making progress, but it is very difficult to dismantle the infrastructure that is funded, overseen, and powered by problem program thinking and shift that into a person-centric model. We have some clients that have moved down the path of human-centered design, persona development, journey mapping, and are really working to restructure their processes so that they are putting that person at the center and serving them more holistically. That work, I think, is only going to continue to increase. And again, it's some of my personal favorite work to do because it really makes a difference. And by the way, it's always more efficient for government. Because you made the point, these agencies, these programs are serving the same population, yet they're asking in each separate program, let me see your proof of address, let me see your proof of income, let me see your proof of family composition. So now as a government, I've asked that question 7 times. I've had to process that information 7 times when in reality, I could have done it once and delivered a more holistic suite of services. There's gain on both sides to continue to move down this path.
Right.
But there's pressure and resistance to, sometimes folks like the way things are.
Well, you say sometimes. I think that's in all of us, isn't it? Especially the older we get.
Yes.
Don't change anything. God, that would be awful.
I don't know. I'm trying to stay flexible the older I get. I want to stay curious. I don't want to get, stuck. But it is. It's human nature to gravitate toward what's comfortable.
It is. It's absolutely it's human nature. But there's one thing that humans get better at over time, I think, and that is the human side of operating in these kind of organizations where you're using technologies, tools, processes, paperwork, or whatever it is that you're using with one goal in mind, and that's ultimately to deliver services to your fellow human beings, your citizens. Mm-hmm. And most people, I believe, who work in those kind of contexts are there primarily to do that. That's where they find 100%. Real value and purpose in their work. And what probably is what helps them to deal with the frustrations that often come with it. If you can free them up as much as possible from the machining and the complexity and the rubber stamping and whatever the technology might be doing to make your life a little bit more complicated, and the more you can free them up to actually just be human beings, that problem kind of flips around. Suddenly you just get people who are really good at doing it more. Does that make sense? The human being.
Absolutely. And I think, we think about what casework looked like in the 1950s, 1960s. Casework was meeting with a family, taking handwritten notes about the family's needs, making those connections to community services or to longer term programs. That was casework. It was very personal. It was very, there was continuity. So folks were not shifted, regularly from one group to the next or one caseworker to the next. Then you look at casework, I'll say a decade ago was the last time I sat inside of one of the DHS offices with someone who was actually applying for services. And I watched, the caseworker read questions off a screen and type in answers. And we see that in our physicians' offices too, by the way, right?
Same thing.
I'm blessed. I have a provider who still makes eye contact, but I don't think my doctor went to school, to do data entry. And I don't think that the caseworkers love spending a ton of time behind a screen. I think that we have to move. We've kind of moved from everything being manual to everything being automated, but now's the opportunity to pare down the automation to the things that are really impactful and valuable.
Yeah.
What are the pieces of technology, of data, of automation that empower me to go forward and have that human connection, because so many things are being taken care of in the background automatically that I no longer have to be worried with those. I no longer have to be burdened by those. And by the way, globally, we have a workforce concern in the human services area right now. We have fewer people coming into the field. We have fewer people staying for long tenures in the field. So there's a press from a workforce standpoint to also figure out how to move the needle on tech away from tech for the sake of tech or data for the sake of data, to an earlier conversation you and I had, to really being intentional, being purposeful in what data you collect and what systems you deploy. Great example. Just a handful of years ago in the US, a lot of money was put out from the federal government to build integrated eligibility systems. The idea that I, as a person, can come in and tell you everything about me, and then you can automatically connect me to all the programs for which I might be eligible. One of the biggest fail points in that entire process, because by the way, none of those delivered on the big promise, one of the big fail points was things were done so quickly and the money was available for such a short period of time that they just picked up the failing processes from the existing environment and brought them into new technology.
Right.
Rather than taking that step back and saying, okay, from an eligibility standpoint, what is actually required? What do I actually need to ask? What do I actually need to verify? Who actually needs to verify that? And then building the system around that efficient path forward. And I think that honestly is one of the most exciting things for me about AI and generative AI right now is taking that technology, overlaying what we have right now, which is all the data and all the systems, and being intentional about pulling out the pieces and the processes that are most effective, and then even tooling them up a little bit more. And I know the conversation very quickly goes to, well, we're trying to replace state employees or federal employees, or
Yeah.
there aren't enough people, there are not enough human beings to do all of the work that needs to be done. When we talk about building these efficiencies and this intentional, method, this intentional strategy of becoming more effective and efficient, it's not about replacing people. It's about reducing the noise that they deal with today on a regular basis, empowering them to do the work they actually love to do and wanted to do, and finding, that balance between what needs to be done and the workforce they have available.
Yeah. And of course, you have a struggle hiring enough people anyway.
Absolutely.
But then obviously the population is, as we know, aging and becoming, there's a multiplier somewhere in terms of the number of chronic diseases that we're all ultimately going to be carrying in, and then the problems we have. So the problem, the services that are required are expanding, and the number of people that are around to deliver those services are reducing at the same time. It's it is a critical problem, and it's easy to see where technology can become a difference maker there. And actually, rather than just imagining it, maybe you could give us some examples. We were talking about this before. If you were going to pick two or three, where would you point our eyeballs?
Yeah, I'm going to. I think I'll start with something that is a bit more theoretical, not deployed yet, but extraordinarily practical and probably will be deployed very quickly in many places. And that's the idea of quality review automation. So if you think about all of these human services programs, each of them has some process that they go through by which case notes are reviewed, case files are reviewed, and feedback is provided to the caseworker on where things might have been done better, or best practices weren't followed, or maybe even non-compliant activity occurred. And so today, that is a manual process. The way that it happens is a sampling of cases. So there's maybe 3%, 5%, 10% of the cases pulled. Typically, it's retroactively reviewed. So that case file may have been created 3 years ago, but just now today, we're actually looking for it. And we're going to go back and try to tell the caseworker, hey, 3 years ago, you made a mistake here. This could have been done differently. This should have been done differently. Well, it's an important process today, but imagine that process revamped. Imagine being able to review all of the cases in real time and provide real time feedback to the caseworker to say, hey, yesterday, when you completed that case report or that case summary, you left out 3 things. Go ahead and fill those in today. And then moving forward, don't forget to fill those in. So what that solution, by the way, is designed. It is something we've been working on with a particular client. And it is the use of Gen AI, not to replace a person, not to tell a caseworker what to do, and certainly not to make decisions about what a caseworker should do with a family or an individual, but to do a quality review because it's ingested policies, procedures, compliance requirements at the federal, state, and potentially local level, maybe contractual requirements if this happens to be a private entity doing government business. So all of those things ingested into the AI model. Then you run the case file through it, and what you get is that list of suggestions in real time across 100% of your case files. That is dramatically different than how things function today. Yeah. And, for training caseworkers, again, we talked about workforce turnover, right? So you have caseworkers coming in who have less tenure. That is an inline learning tool. Now we've gone from just doing retroactive quality reviews to actually teaching and training in line from a quality perspective, caseworkers who may have not been on the job very long. So I'll pause there, but I have a litany of examples.
No, that sounds fascinating. You can see that. Actually, that's a really good example of generative AI in being used productively in a way that's complementary to us sort of emotional flesh bags that are walking around with actual feet and legs and arms and things, and not being replaced, but helped by it. And actually, yes, we're still, as far as I'm concerned anyway, generative AI is very exciting, especially if you're a venture capitalist. But it's actually still quite hard to see real world examples of it actually doing some really meaningful things. And if that goes live soon somewhere, that would be one of them. What else?
Absolutely.
Example.
Okay, so I'm going to go, relatively speaking, to your backyard. May not be quite your backyard, but it's closer than I would be from it. And that's Maidstone. Okay. So in the UK, and we've spent quite a bit of time talking about this, we partnered with a company called Xantura. Love that company, still love speaking with them, work with them a lot. They built the tool and we built the wraparound services, the redesign of the service delivery model to do something very simple and very common sense oriented. To take the data that government currently has about a particular individual, to add those data pieces together and to create a risk algorithm that would begin to flag when circumstances changing would actually indicate an increased risk for loss of shelter. So someone trending toward homelessness. We see this has happened, this has happened, this has happened because it shows up in the various systems. But we put those pieces together and we can see this individual is at a heightened risk. So proactively, rather than wait for the person to become homeless, to stand, as my colleague loves to say, on the sidewalk with a suitcase asking for help, we see that trend toward homelessness. We have a caseworker who does proactive intervention. So you're not waiting for the person to navigate to the right phone number or even know that they need assistance. And then there's a proactive offer of assistance given. I'll just give you the highlights of this, and we certainly have a lot more about this on our website. You guys have run a feature on it before. But the long and short of it is, in the first year, we saw a decrease of new instances of homelessness from 40% to 0.4%. In the second year of the Maidstone program, what we saw was Maidstone sitting at about 9% continued increase in new instances of homelessness, while all the surrounding boroughs sat at about 20%. Yeah. Now, it's very difficult to prove when bad things don't happen. That's a conversation I engage in quite frequently. But general wisdom and logic would say the primary difference in what Maidstone was doing at the end of that second year compared to its neighboring boroughs was using data, using technology to improve how the caseworker, the human, I think flesh bag was the term you used earlier.
There might be other ways of describing human.
Could then, actually proactively reach out. So it's a caseworker doing casework, but not waiting for the person to fall off the cliff of crisis and then come in and ask for help when there's so much that would need to be fixed, but rather an opportunity as a caseworker to say, hey, I can offer you assistance today. And potentially that keeps you in your neighborhood, close to your doctor, close to your childcare provider and your job and your children's school. That is tech for good, right? That is using things like predictive analytics and language learning models and coupling them with human compassion, knowledge, and insight and wisdom to deliver something that makes a dramatic impact, not just individually in those lives, but in the community. Yeah. It's a healthier community when that's the way things are happening. And it's cheaper, by the way. Can't negate the fact that it is less costly for government to take that type of an approach, even with the cost of technology. Yeah. than it is to wait for someone to fall off the cliff of crisis and then try to do everything required to stand that person back up on their feet.
Absolutely. And when you look at it, I guess from a really high up perspective, all you're talking about there really is examining a whole bunch of information where red flags are existing already, and any human with enough time and enough access to those different systems could draw the same conclusions quite easily.
See it. Yes.
It's just really hard to do that fast. And
100%, we're limited. Our capacity is limited.
Right. But you can apply the same. You could apply the same idea in so many different use cases as well, couldn't you?
Yes, and thinking about AI, here's another thing too. If you look at, we'll take child welfare for a moment. Look at child welfare caseworkers. These individuals, a single human being, has to review and examine for pertinent details medical records, court documentation, arrest records, perhaps, financial information, family history information. So we're asking one person with an 8-pound human brain to be able to go through the reams of paper in all these different verticals, all these different areas of expertise, pull out relevant and pertinent facts in real time, by the way, in real time, in support of making a decision about the welfare and care and well-being of that child. That is a nearly impossible task. It really, truly is. And again, I would never advocate that technology says, yes, remove the child, no, keep the child in the home, or yes, keep the child in the home, no, remove the child. Technology can't and should never be able to make that decision. But technology can support the decision maker by saying, here's everything that we know from a data perspective. Simple example outside of human services. I fly a lot for work. When I get on the airplane, I see two things happen that give me comfort. One, I see a pilot walk around the plane, look around the plane, kind of do his or her visual inspection, make sure things look right and feel right. I also see that same pilot with a printout. That printout is a diagnostic run on the plane for all the systems and things that the pilot cannot see. I want every plane I'm in to have both of those things happening. I don't want a pilot that doesn't know how to look at the plane, and I don't want a pilot who refuses to read the report.
Yeah. I think we can all agree on
that. Yeah. So it's not scary. It is that. It is using the beautiful coupling of machine intelligence, which can do things just much quicker and much more broadly than we can, with human intuition. And if we do that intentionally, thoughtfully, and well, we literally can change so many of the challenges we see in front of us with vulnerable populations in particular.
Yeah. And it is exciting, and you can see the green shoots of that kind of thing happening in the pockets that we described. I know I can see that anyway. And when it works, it's genuinely transformative, not just for the experience of the people who are doing the job, because that's important, but also for the residents at the end of the line. It can be
absolutely
amazing. If you think about it, tell me if I'm taking this too far, but we see this in action now, really, in serious case reviews when they're being reported in newspapers, because it's done retroactively. Mm-hmm. And the only time that you really get that serious forensic examination of all the different multiple agencies, all the different data sources that you might be able to identify to, in retrospect, say, why did this bad thing happen to this individual? Mm-hmm. Then it all makes sense. Like, actually, there's red flags all over this thing. You just didn't necessarily know about it at the time. If actually you've just got a machine doing it in real time, then human beings can intervene and they can act, and you can literally save lives. It doesn't have to be that dramatic.
And you have to have, but I would agree with you completely. And I would say, I think the other part of this is not just training us in how to use technology, but training us in how to couple the intelligence of technology with our intuition, because we can't move forward with all this great tech and have people, human beings, going, well, the system said yes, the system said no, the system showed me that. You still have to apply your own knowledge, your own, experience and your own judgment in those situations. So I think, that holistic approach, looking at policy, process, and data and technology together, looking at coupling the human being with the machine output and what you're getting of value there, looking at the efficiency as it aligns to the workforce, not to reduce the number of people we have, but to make the jobs that those people are doing something they love and that feels impactful. Nobody wants to sit and just type for a day, with you want that impact. You want to feel like you're having, or I should say most people want to feel like they're having that impact. So, there's a great deal of strategy work done. Again, it's interesting, you've got to find that balance. Analysis paralysis, you can't do that. That's why we're still using fax machines
right.
in a lot of our government agencies. I understand we've got to be cautious and careful, but we also need to move. We need to move forward now, and having that transformation strategy where you think about all those things, the data, the technology, the intentionality, the workforce training, getting the workforce excited about the power that this gives them, and the opportunity that this creates for them. And then to me, most importantly, and I'll go all the way back to how I started, as a child, watching my mom raise two of us with a full-time job. She worked every single day. If someone would have offered her a cleaner, clearer path to assistance, we could have had that help a lot earlier. We could have had more comprehensive help. I might not have been in 3 schools in 3rd grade.
Wow.
It's a little bit of jockeying around as you're trying to work through life circumstances, and bringing in those experiences like that. That's my passion. I love tech because I'm a tech nerd. I'm a geek at heart, but it also is because it is our best opportunity in my lifetime to be able to really serve those families, those children, those individuals in the best way possible. And we spend billions of dollars in human services globally. And there's such efficiency to be gained in the system. There's plenty of money to shore up all of the poverty issues in the world. We're just not spending it as smartly as I think we could be.
Absolutely.
So repurposing some of that. And that is what gets me up every day. I tell anyone who works in human services, especially our young professionals coming into the field, if you are going to stay in human services, if you're going to continue to do this work for a period of time, you need to either have been a beneficiary in the system, or you need to know and love someone who is or has been. Because if you can't keep the people who are receiving assistance at the forefront of your mind, you'll become very quickly tired and frustrated with sometimes the pace at which we can do things inside government. So, always keeping those individuals close to our heart and foremost in our planning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your passion shines through. It must be said. And as long as there are folks like you actually working on this problem, I think we'll probably get there in the end. We kind of have to, really, don't we? Let's be honest. We've got too many problems.
We do.
And there are solutions, and that's where the optimism comes from, I think. Now, I think I've borrowed enough of your time, Andrea. So I will just point anybody that's listening to this towards our website, techforgood.net, where they can find some wordage from you. As long as we've published it properly and not tried to automate it with some machine, and we've done our job properly, it will be there for some more thoughts on this topic. And I hope that we can reconvene around this at some point, because obviously we, not necessarily on this particular recording, but there's plenty of stuff we've talked about that I would like to carry on doing that at some point in the future when time allows. But in the meantime,
absolutely.
Thank you very much once again for joining us today.
Romilly, it is always a pleasure to speak with you. I love our offline conversations as much as our online conversations. So happy to join in at any point, and always happy to be connected with like-minded individuals through LinkedIn. We do, a lot of times that we're making note when this is published and available in the article, I'll be promoting that on my LinkedIn page too. So more than happy to connect with other folks who are passionate like you are.
Brilliant. Well, we look forward to the engagement and the conversation. And until next time, thanks again.